The war just changed, not on a battlefield, not with a missile strike or a tanker attack or a press conference from a Pentagon podium. It changed with a single sentence. A senior Iranian official told CNN on Friday that Iran is considering allowing oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz on one condition. The oil must be paid for in Chinese yuan, not dollars. Read that again slowly, because the full weight of it takes a moment to land. The Strait of Hormuz carries 20% of the world's daily oil supply. It is the single most critical energy choke point on the planet. 14 days of American military operations have failed to reopen it, and now Iran is offering to crack it open, not as a concession, not as a surrender, not as a gesture of goodwill, as a transaction. The price is not a ceasefire. The price is not a political agreement. The price is a currency. Specifically, the abandonment of the currency that has underwritten American global power for the last 52 years. To understand what Iran announced on Friday, you first need to understand what the petrodollar actually is. Not in theory, but in the daily mechanical reality of how the global economy has operated for over half a century. In 1974, Saudi Arabia made a deal with the United States. The terms were simple and world-altering. Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, America would provide military protection to the kingdom. Other oil-producing nations followed. The result was the petrodollar system, a framework that ensured every country on Earth that needed to buy oil had to first acquire US dollars, which meant permanent global demand for dollars, which meant America could run deficits, borrow cheaply, and project financial power in ways no other nation could replicate. The petrodollar was not merely an economic arrangement. It was the infrastructure of American hegemony. The reason America's military budget could exceed the next 10 countries combined. The reason American sanctions hurt. The reason the world needed Washington's permission to participate in the global economy. That system was born in 1974. It has been running uninterrupted for 52 years. On day 14 of this war, Iran announced how it ends. Iran does not need to destroy the dollar. It does not need to defeat the American military. It does not need regime change or a formal surrender or any of the outcomes that war normally produces. It needs to establish one precedent, that oil can flow through the world's most critical choke point in a currency other than dollars. Once that precedent exists, once the first tanker carries its cargo through Hormuz, paid in yuan, and arrives safely at a Chinese port, every subsequent argument for why oil must be priced in dollars becomes harder to sustain. And here is the detail that transforms this from a threat into a logical next step. The precedent is already partially established. Since February 28th, the first day of Operation Epic Fury, Iran has shipped at least 11.7 million barrels of crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Every barrel went to China. Every transaction was in yuan. China's tankers moved freely. China's shipping was not attacked. China's oil kept flowing while every other nation's tankers sat anchored outside the strait, burning insurance costs, watching their cargo sit. The bifurcation of the strait, yuan barrels moving, dollar barrels stopped, has been operating for 2 weeks. The announcement on Friday was not Iran proposing something new. It was Iran codifying something already happening and asking whether the world wants to make it permanent. China did not fire a single missile in this war. China does not need to. The war is doing China's work for America bombed Kharg Island this week, Iran's main oil export hub, the facility that handles 90% of its crude exports. Trump announced the strike as a demonstration of control. Iran's response was to resume loading tankers at the Jask terminal on the Gulf of Oman, south of the strait, bypassing the entire choke point for its own exports, while keeping the strait closed to everyone else. The military target was struck, the economic infrastructure adapted within 48 hours, and the negotiating position, the strait opens when the currency changes, remained intact throughout. The war was supposed to force the strait open. Instead, the strait is being offered back to the world on Iran's terms in China's currency at the price of 52 years of petrodollar architecture. Hegseth is at the podium saying the mission is succeeding. Trump is on Truth Social calling it a victory. The oil market is pricing in a world where 20% of global supply requires yuan to access. And somewhere in Beijing, in a room that does not hold press conferences and does not issue statements, a calculation that was made years before this war began is proving correct. When a country in Europe needs to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, it does not pay in euros. It converts its euros to dollars first, then pays in dollars. When a country in Asia buys oil from Iraq, dollars first. When a country in Africa buys oil from anywhere, dollars first. This is not a preference. For 52 years, it has been the operational reality of global energy trade. And that reality means that every country on Earth constantly needs to hold dollar reserves, not because they want dollars specifically, but because their energy supply depends on having dollars available when needed. That permanent structural demand for dollars is what allows America to do things no other country can do. It can run a trade deficit indefinitely without its currency collapsing. It can impose sanctions that actually hurt. It can borrow at lower interest rates than any other government on Earth. The petrodollar is not one policy among many. It is the foundation on which every other element of American global power rests. Now watch what happens when the Strait of Hormuz begins accepting yuan. Countries that need Gulf oil start accumulating yuan reserves instead of dollar reserves. The demand for dollars as an operational necessity decreases. As that demand decreases, the value of the dollar, supported for decades partly by this structural global requirement, faces sustained downward pressure. As the dollar weakens, the cost of America's dollar-denominated debt increases in real terms. As that cost increases, the financial architecture that allows America to maintain 800 military bases across 80 countries, to fund a defense budget larger than the next 10 nations combined, to underwrite the kind of sustained military campaign it is currently running in the Middle East. All of it becomes more expensive at exactly the moment it is already being strained by a war nobody planned properly. China has been working toward this for years. Its alternative payment system, CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system, processed the equivalent of $245 trillion US in yuan-denominated transactions in 2025 alone. That is a 43% increase from the year before. The infrastructure for a yuan-based global trade system is not theoretical. It is operational. It is growing. And Iran, by sitting on the choke point for 20% of global oil and announcing that yuan is the passage condition, has just handed China the single most powerful accelerant for yuan internationalization that any Chinese policy document could have imagined. China did not design this war, but it designed the conditions that make this outcome possible. For years, Beijing encouraged Iran to develop alternative payment channels. For years, it built CIPS as a swift alternative. For years, it bought Iranian oil in yuan at discounted prices, establishing the bilateral precedent quietly outside the sanctioned perimeters. When this war began, when the strait closed, when dollar tankers stopped, when China's tankers kept moving, the infrastructure was already in place. The switch from bilateral precedent to global condition required only one sentence from one Iranian official to one CNN journalist. Russia wins too, though in a different way. Trump reversed the American ban on Russian oil imports this week, a decision that European allies immediately described as a gift to Putin, driven entirely by the desperation to replace Gulf supply that the Hormuz closure had cut off. The country America went to war partly to isolate is now being invited back into Western energy supply chains, because the alternative is economic pain that American allies cannot sustain. Iran closed the strait, America reversed Russian sanctions. The geopolitical architecture of the last decade reshuffled in 14 days. The Houthi activity in the Red Sea compounds everything. The shipping routes that remained open as alternatives to Hormuz are narrowing. When both the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea are compromised simultaneously, the global shipping system faces the kind of sustained disruption that cannot be managed by releasing strategic petroleum reserves or reversing Russian oil sanctions. It requires the routes to physically reopen. Those routes will only reopen on terms that the forces controlling them accept. Those forces are not accepting American terms. They are setting their own. Every piece of leverage America thought it had in this conflict has bent backward. The military campaign has not collapsed Iran. The sanctions are being selectively reversed. The strait is being offered back at a price America cannot pay without dismantling its own financial foundations. The UN announcement is not a threat. It is a bill. Hegseth said this week that Iran's missile capacity is down 90%, drone volume down 95%. The military campaign proceeding exactly as planned. All of that may be accurate in the military domain. None of it addresses the UN announcement. None of it addresses the 11.7 million barrels of Iranian oil already flowing freely to China in yuan while American tankers sit anchored. None of it addresses the 43% annual growth in China's yuan-denominated cross-border transactions. The military metrics and the financial metrics are running in opposite directions. And in a war fought at least partly over who controls the global energy economy, the financial metrics are the ones that matter in 50 years. Trump's administration understands this, at least partially. The announcement that Trump told G7 leaders Iran is about to surrender came on the same day CNN reported the Yuan for Hormuz proposal. The timing is not coincidental. America needs Iran to surrender before the Yuan precedent becomes entrenched. Every day the strait stays Yuan only is another day the precedent deepens. Every tanker that transits Hormuz in yuan rather than dollars is another data point proving the system works. Every country that accumulates yuan reserves to access Gulf oil is a country slightly less dependent on dollar reserves. The clock on petrodollar dominance is not infinite. It has been running since 1974, and the war that was supposed to secure American dominance in the Middle East is accelerating its end. Trump's America went to war to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power and to reassert American dominance over the Middle East. 14 days later, Iran's nuclear material sits in a mountain American bombs cannot reach. American tankers are being hit at a rate of 1 per day. The Strait of Hormuz is closed to dollar transactions and open to yuan transactions. China is accumulating oil reserves at discounted prices. Russia is being invited back into Western energy supply chains. And the petrodollar system that has underwritten American global power since 1974 is facing its most serious structural challenge in 52 years. Iran did not win this war militarily. It may not need to. Every day the Yuan for Hormuz condition stands is a day the financial architecture America went to war to protect erodes further. The bombs are falling. The targets are being struck. The press conferences are happening. And in the background, quietly, the currency is changing. The petrodollar was 52 years old the day this war started. Iran just announced how it ends, not with a military defeat, not with a signed surrender, with a condition at a choke point, pay in yuan, or wait. The world is calculating its answer. China already knows its answer. It has known for years.